unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time.
So, when I first got interested in libertarianism, probably in my very early 20s, I don't know, maybe it was 19. Maybe somebody mentioned it when I was a Mormon missionary in Brazil. I don't know, but it seems like it was my early 20s when I started reading books and I became familiar with the idea. And it all jibed with the way I thought anyway, None of the ideas weren't new to me. They just were things that I already thought naturally with the experience that I had had in life up to that point, Laissez-faire, live and let live. Simple, clean, easy to deal with. Freedom, why not? What's wrong with that? But, for the most part, in Utah, people were jibed with that. Freedom was a good thing. But then in San Francisco, boy, I didn't expect it, but, I figured, of course, these weirdos are going to want freedom. They're not going to want anybody telling them what to do, and of course they're not going to want to tell somebody else to do what to do. But boy, was I wrong. No, I came down here and all these people flying their freak flags high. Turns out most of them, not all, most of them were quite interested in bossing people around. Quite interested in telling people how to live, But so I'd get lots of heated debates with people, those types, authoritarians, people that want to manage your life. I honestly can't understand why so many freak people, weirdos, want the government controlling their lives. It makes no sense to me. I just can't figure out the logic, because they're all pretty much the same. Guns are bad. Trump is Hitler. Give Trump all the guns. Take away the guns from the people so they can't fight against Hitler. It's just baffling logic. The government is terrible. Cops are terrible. Shooting unarmed black men. But we only want cops to have guns. They're the only people we want to have guns. Like, how do you compute that? How does that work in your mind? Anyway, so most of these people are just kind of, they call themselves leftists, Democrats, progressives is the way they like to call themselves here in San Francisco, or there in San Francisco. I'm in Salt Lake City right now. But one of the arguments they love to make against the libertarians like me, and I'm a little bit less libertarian than I used to be. I'm more pragmatic, but don't tell anybody, because I still like to argue from a libertarian perspective. Because, you got to fiercely advocate for the position, the direction you want the ball to go in, because if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. Anyway, I digress. I hate it when people say that. But one of the things they love to say is, yeah, well, you're already a socialist, man. What the fuck? You drive on roads, don't you? Huh? What about the fire department? Huh? You already are a socialist. As if they're and every time it's said, they say it as if it's never been considered. As if that's not a thing you consider literally in the first 10 minutes of exploring the idea of libertarianism. What about the roads? Who would build the roads? And they use it because it actually kind of seems like maybe a good argument. And so I used to get distracted by it, and I'd go, well, corporations would step up, and people need to get roads. I mean, how are you going to deliver the goods? They'd figure it out, and toll roads work, and blah, blah, blah. And I'd give my libertarian spiel. But then one day, about 5 years ago, I just stopped and I said, what about roads? You commie fuck. Aren't you complaining about humanity being terrible and a blight on the planet? Aren't you also an environmentalist? Aren't roads the way people shuffle all their stuff to and fro to destroy the planet? Are you literally using roads as a good example for government when almost everything you describe that's wrong with the planet is facilitated by roads? You know, pretty good one, right? Pretty good argument. But it goes further. Let's just imagine, this is a little thought experiment for you. I've tried this on a few of these heavy-handed statists who just want state control over everything. I said, try to imagine a world in which governments never subsidized or funded roads. No money. They just said, well, roads are pretty cool. Because, roads came about because of the wheel. Somebody invents the wheel. They go, wow, this fucking thing is great. Hell, look at this. We can just push this thing forward, and if we're on a hill, we can go a long way. Gravity will pull this thing. Wheels, great. Well, shit, they get stuck in mud, though. So let's make roads. All right, so make roads, you car manufacturers. Oh, we can't afford it. That's a huge project. By the way, everybody's a retard when I do a voice. That's Henry Ford. Duh, everybody, yeah. I mean, it's a little known fact that Henry Ford sounded like that. But let's imagine the government or the people said, you want roads? Go build them yourself. In fact, if my studies are correct, for a long time, people did build their own roads. Not a big deal. But at a certain point, I don't know what year, you look it up, you've got Google, but at a certain point, the government said, you know what? We need to take money from the people and build them some roads, because they want them, but we want them too, because we want our country to be strong, and roads will help us ship equipment to and fro willy-nilly. Well, so what do the roads do? The roads make it easier for cars. Cars need gas and oil and rubber. So how much of that? We're all wanting to drive less. But imagine a world where the roads weren't subsidized. Would there be less cars? Would something else have developed? I mean, the wheel is pretty great. It's pretty great, but is it as good as legs? Legs can step over things, bumps. Legs with a little trail can, have you ever walked down a cobblestone trail where you just put a couple, stones down? You can climb up a mountain with legs. Have you ever seen a goat climb up the side of a cliff? His legs are pretty fucking amazing. What? And have you seen these new robots that are coming around now that can walk and stuff? Is it possible that technology might have developed a lot faster without roads? Or let's even think even better. What if roads weren't subsidized and these people, these wheeler dealers, literally, people who deal in wheels, these wheeler dealers weren't just handed a whole pile of money, Here you go. Now you got roads. Your wheels can roll freely. Thank you. Signed the people. We've just handed you tons of money. And all these people can get their products from to and fro. Seems great, right? But the pollution increases. You need more oil. You need all these things. And nobody's creating a robot that walks or a machine that walks. And if this were a video podcast, I would link to some video of these guys that make these robots that walk along the beach using just the power of the wind. There's a bottle that I keep in the back of my van of water. And you know what I notice? It sloshes back and forth. And as it does, it gently creeps to the front of the van. And so when I get into the back of the van, I see it's moved by feet. So just that sloshing back and forth of the water creates movement. And it doesn't take a lot of energy to get it sloshing. That's kind of how human beings. Did you know that walking, well, actually, riding a bicycle, they say, is the most efficient form of transportation. But right behind that, walking is. You don't use hardly any energy walking. You do when you run, but when you're walking, there's this amazing thing of the balance and the momentum and inertia that gets you going. Once you get going, it's just maintaining the go is fine because you're basically falling forward. It's almost like being in orbit above the planet. Same type of principle. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. So walking really requires very little energy. Right? Of course, when you go up a hill, you need some. So, you're going to have to figure out some kind of fuel for that, too. But just imagine, are you still imagining? Just take all the roads away and imagine all this new technology where we're got robotic horses, maybe, without wheels. They don't need a flat surface. They don't need a flat surface. What does the world look like? Does it look chaotic? Do roads develop anyway? I don't know. You imagine it. I'm not going to imagine this for you. Think about it. And that's just with legs. But let's think of another thing. Wings. Balloons. Remember how the Zeppelin was really popular? Those big things, big blimps caught on fire because they used a certain kind of hydrogen. Was it hydrogen they used or helium? Super flammable. Oh, the humanity. Put the kibosh on balloons, but probably because the roads were there. Why invest too much more brain power into flight when the roads were bought and paid for by the people? The money was stolen from them, and then the government subsidized wheels, basically, by building roads. Why didn't they subsidize jetpacks? Wings of some sort? What are we missing? What flight don't we have? Why is the drone so late to the game? Is it because the government interfered? What would have come back then with those brains back then? What would balloon life look like if it had a chance, if it didn't have to compete with government-subsidized wheels? How much less energy would we be using if we were mapping out and calculating the air currents that are already blowing across the planet that we're not using with balloons? We're just talking about balloons, but what don't we know about? What gas haven't we figured out? What balloon technology did we miss? Because people, the wheeler dealers, didn't have to compete. They were handed this huge government subsidy. What if the roads didn't exist? What if a different kind of flight apparatus existed? What if a flight type of bicycle became invented 100 years ago instead of the wheels? Because since the government wasn't building roads, they had to think of something else. And somebody came up with a very easy way for humans to fly under their own power. I mean, I get it. I'm being ridiculous here. Shut up. I get it. I'm not an idiot. If that would exist, it probably would have existed anyway. That's what you could argue. You could say, wow, the roads didn't inhibit that. But let's pretend it did. Let's pretend that the roads were so fucking fun and cars were so cool, and they are, and they were, that just people didn't think, the mother of necessity is the mother of invention. Well, if you don't need to get from one place into the other in a different way because roads exist. You take the path of least resistance. The roads are built. Take a car, you dumb shit. Why are you trying to invent a flying apparatus? You know? But what if they did? What if? What would the world look like? Well, I mean, let's take it a step further. What would the world look like if humans developed, let's get really science fiction-y. Let's say that because there's no roads, somebody invented a way for wings, people to have wings, right? So we could fly. Imagine we could fly under our own power. I think I already said that. What would the world look like? Where would we live? Would we live in valleys like we live now? Would we, because that's the best place to build roads is on a flat place, Or would we live on mountaintops? If we were bird-like, we could all just float on up to a mountaintop. I mean, probably not. Not a lot of them, because it's kind of cold up there, cold and windy. But wouldn't it be tempting? Might it be tempting? And the view. We all love a view, right? So would maybe the mountaintops all be populated? I don't know. Fucking roads, because those goddamn roads, we'll never know. Because some fucking asshole government decided to subsidize these genius roads and give the automobile a head start. That automobile, you don't have big skyscrapers without the automobile. You just don't. Without the wheels and the roads. What would that look like? And let's say, okay, so fuck the flying machine. Okay, that never happened. Too ridiculous. Balloons, maybe balloons are what's going on. Okay, getting heavy shit from here to there. No roads. Tremendous oversight, by the way. Somebody forgot to invent the wheel. Brain experiments. They don't have to be sensible. We're going on a journey here. What do the communities look like? Do they all have Walmarts? Or are they harder to get to? What if you just can't? What if no balloons were invented? What if roads weren't subsidized, so therefore they just weren't, there's no big interstates. They're smaller and windier and private and expensive. Let's say the roads are expensive. Let's say, yeah, there's a road from San Francisco to LA, but you got to pay a lot of money to use it because it costs a lot of money to make. So people stick around closer to home a little bit more, right? And what happens then? Do towns look alike, or do they look really drastically different? Is there any homogenization? Or maybe even languages are a little bit different, maybe the dialects are stronger. Maybe cultures are more defined from town to town because it's hard to get to them. Are there factory farms without roads? I doubt it. Because how do you distribute that much meat over that distance? It's pretty fun brain experiment, huh? It's silly. It's very silly. Because, of course, roads exist. And we have to deal with them now. But do we really have to use them as an example of something wonderful all the time? Do we really have to say, yay government roads, woohoo, big semi-trucks delivering shit all over the place, woohoo, asphalt everywhere, woohoo, hot city centers, woohoo, heat islands. I'm not complaining about roads. I like roads. I'm in my fucking van. I'm on a road right now. You know? I don't hate roads. But just quit trying to think all your arguments are so great. Whatever you think your idea, your great argument is, slow down, deconstruct it, play devil's advocate, beat the hell out of it, use your imagination. The government doesn't fix everything. You know? No, it doesn't. And that's about enough of that. Thanks for listening.